Liberation of Jerusalem. With the ending of the Battle of Hattin, the whole Crusader army ceased to exist. King Guy was arrested, with all the surviving Crusader princes. Their true cross also came to the Muslim hands. The most important prisoners were presented before Salahdin. Salahdin offered a cup of iced julep to Guy, but took a big gulp from it. Then he passed it to Reynald of Chatillon. Salahdin intervened in a flash. Through his interpreter he told Guy, "You are the one who gave him a drink. I gave him no drink, nor any of my food." According to Islamic tradition, offering a drink or food to a prisoner represents offering safety by the captor. But Salahdin did not want to offer such protection to Reynald. Salahdin berated Reynald for his constant insult and threat towards the Muslims. Seeing no remorse in Reynald's face, Salahdin unsheathed his scimitar and slashed Reynald's neck, exacting the full revenge of the Muslims. With Guy under arrest and his army completely wiped out, the whole kingdom of Jerusalem had no more resistance to offer against Salahdin. It was time for Salahdin to knock on the gate of Jerusalem. As Salahdin progressed with his army towards his primal goal, Jerusalem, he did not make any strategic mistakes as he did 10 years ago, which resulted in the defeat at Montgazart. This time, Salahdin sent troops to occupy all the remaining Crusader strongholds and ports. Acre, Sidon, Beirut, Jaffa, Mirabel, Ascalon, all fell one after another in front of Salahdin's troops. Salahdin showed mercy to the defenders and granted them generous terms for surrender. This ensured swift and near bloodless submission of the cities. By the time Salahdin reached Jerusalem, only Kerak and Tyre were still resisting against Salahdin's troops. Salahdin could not sidetrack his army to capture these sites, as that would mean delay in the liberation of Jerusalem. This was a well-thought decision based on the current situation, but would turn into a strategic mistake by Salahdin, as Tyre would be the arrival point of the Western forces during the Third Crusade. 20th of September, 1187. Salahdin climbed up a small hill nearby his camp. He could see the Dome of Rock glistering with golden rays under the sun beyond the wall of Jerusalem. A little behind the Dome of Rock stood the Al-Aqsa Mosque, two sacred buildings he so desired, his lifelong dream, his ultimate goal. When the Crusaders took Jerusalem from the Muslims in 1099, during the First Crusade, they killed all the non-Christian inhabitants of the city, which created a knee-deep blood pool at the Al-Aqsa complex. The inhabitants of Jerusalem feared that the Muslims would take revenge in a similar manner once they retake the city, so they prepared to defend Jerusalem at all cost. Both the Christians and the Muslims venerate the city as a holy place, so it was a religious and moral obligation for both sides to prevail. Looking at the third holiest city in Islam, Salahdin knew that it would not be an easy task to take the city back. Yet he commanded his troops to move forward, and the siege of Jerusalem began. The Muslims initiated the attack with volleys of arrows targeting the defenders on the wall. Salahdin encircled the city with his army and assessed the fortifications to find a weak point. After 5 days of assessment, Salahdin focused his attack on the less protected section of the wall between Damascus Gate and Jehoshaphat Gate. The continuous bombardment from the trebuchets started. The Christians realized that the fight was over. They offered to stand down if Salahdin would promise the safety of its inhabitants. Salahdin had no desire to destroy the city itself to ashes in the process of taking it, nor did he want an unnecessary bloodbath at the holy city. His main goal was to retake the holy city under Muslim custody, and not to take cruel revenge for what the Crusaders did 88 years ago. So Salahdin showed mercy and offered generous terms for the surrender of the city. In exchange, 10 dinar for each man, 5 dinar for each woman, and 1 dinar for each child. Salahdin promised to let the Christian inhabitants of Jerusalem free. They were also allowed to take as much as they could carry when they left the city. A very generous offer, considering other contemporary terms for surrender in that era. And it didn't discriminate between rich and poor. Everyone had to pay the same amount. Finally, on Friday, October 2nd, in the year of 1187, the city of Jerusalem was surrendered to the Muslims. What an auspicious day it must have been for the Muslims, as they gathered at the Al-Aqsa Mosque for their Friday prayer after 88 years. In those 88 years, the mosque was used by the Knights Templars as their headquarters, and any Muslim prayer was prohibited. Finally, the mosque returned to its former glory. As the Christians gradually started to leave Jerusalem to other regions still under Crusader control, such as Tyre, Salahdin put work in re-establishing the Islamic features of the city. The Ayyibids' banners were flown on top of the towers in the citadel. The mosques were cleaned and made operational. New madrasas were opened. Islamic scholars were brought back to the city. Regular adans and prayers were started to be performed. Yet Salahdin did not raise a finger on the Church of Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site for Christianity. He kept the promise of the second caliph of Islam, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, who promised to the Christians to protect the site when the Muslims took Jerusalem in 638. Salahdin bought a mimbar from Aleppo, made by Nuruddin, with the wish to place it one day in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and thereby showed respect to the legacy of Nuruddin Zingi. The liberation of Jerusalem from the Crusaders was one of the most symbolic moments in human history. Salahdin's legacy during the liberation of Jerusalem has echoed down the history. The stark contrast between how the Crusaders behaved in 1099 and how Salahdin behaved in 1187 stand as a testimony of his generosity and tolerance. When all the great celebrations were taking place throughout the Islamic lands for the liberation of Jerusalem, back in Vatican, Pope Gregory VIII was infuriated by the loss of Jerusalem from the Christians. He sent letters to all the lords and kings of Europe, urging them to start a holy war to recapture Jerusalem. Thus began one of the greatest saga of all time, the Third Crusade.